Louis XIV ruled France for over 70 years, but what made his power different was how he presented it. Known as the Sun King, he chose the sun as his symbol, not randomly, but deliberately. In his world, the sun was the center of everything. All life revolved around it, and Louis positioned himself the same way. Through carefully designed rituals at Versailles, every part of his day became a performance. Nobles gathered to watch him wake, dress, and move through his routine, competing for the smallest moment of access, as if proximity to the king itself carried meaning. This was not just control, it was belief, reinforced daily. The idea behind it was simple. Louis ruled by divine right, meaning his authority came directly from God. But he did not leave that idea abstract. He performed what became known as the royal touch, laying his hands on the sick as crowds gathered, believing the king himself could heal them. This was repeated again and again, turning belief into experience. The king was no longer just chosen by God. He appeared to act with power that came from him. Whether Louis believed it fully or understood it as tradition is unclear, but the system worked. France did not just obey him, it revolved around him. The king was not just the state, he was something closer to its source. Nimrod. Nimrod is described in early traditions as a mighty ruler, a builder, and a figure of immense authority in the earliest generations after the flood. But what defines his story is not just his power, but how far he was willing to push it. He is often associated with the Tower of Babel, a project that was not simply architectural, but symbolic. At the time, according to the book of Genesis, all of humanity spoke a single language. They were unified, able to act as one, without division or misunderstanding. And with that unity came ambition. The decision to build a tower with its top in the heavens was not about height alone. It was about reach, a structure meant to close the distance between human and divine. In later interpretations, Nimrod becomes the driving force behind it, a ruler who sought to unify people under his authority and push beyond the limits of the world itself. This was not a claim of being a god. It was something more direct, an attempt to approach one. According to the account, that unity did not last. Language was confused, understanding broke down, and the project stopped instantly. The tower was abandoned, not because it could not be built, but because the people building it could no longer understand each other. The structure meant to reach heaven never got there. Nimrod's legacy is not the tower itself, but the attempt, a ruler who did not accept limits and tried to build past them. Qin Shi Huang. Qin Shi Huang unified China and became its first emperor, ruling over a vast territory with absolute authority. But what defined his rule was not just power, but his refusal to accept its limit. In his world, emperors were seen as chosen by heaven, but still human, still bound by time. Qin Shi Huang appears to have rejected that entirely. Ancient accounts describe a ruler obsessed with immortality, not as an idea, but as something that could be achieved. He sent expeditions across the seas in search of elixirs of eternal life, consulting alchemists who promised to unlock the secret to living forever. This was not hidden. It became part of his rule. The emperor who controlled everything in life began trying to control death itself. According to records, he consumed mixtures believed to grant immortality, some containing mercury, a substance now known to be toxic. At the same time, he prepared for eternity. Beneath the earth, an entire army was constructed, thousands of life-size terracotta soldiers built to guard him in the afterlife. This was not symbolic. It was continuation. A ruler who expected his power to extend beyond death, not end with it. Whether he truly believed he could become immortal or was driven by fear is still debated. But the pattern is clear. Qin Shi Huang did not see death as inevitable. He saw it as a problem to be solved. In 210 BC, he died during a journey across his empire. The man who tried to escape death was taken by it like any other. Akhenaten. Akhenaten ruled Egypt during a time when pharaohs were already considered divine, but what he did went far beyond tradition. In Egyptian belief, gods were many, and people could worship them directly through temples, rituals, and offerings. Akhenaten dismantled that entire system. He elevated a single god, Aten, the sun disk, above all others, and removed the old priesthoods that had defined Egyptian religion for centuries. But the most important shift was not the god itself, it was access. In the new system, ordinary people could not reach Aten on their own. They could not pray to it directly or receive its power without a mediator. And that mediator was Akhenaten. Reliefs from his reign show Aten's rays extending downward, ending in hands that offer life, but only to him and his immediate family. This was not decoration, it was a statement. The source of life flowed through one person. This turned religion into structure. Worship no longer connected people to the divine. It connected them to the king. Whether this was genuine belief or a calculated move to centralize power is still debated, but the effect was absolute. Akhenaten did not just rule Egypt, he controlled the only path to its god. After his death, the system collapsed almost immediately. His name was erased, his monuments dismantled, and the old gods restored. The man who placed himself between humanity and the divine was removed from both. Alexander the Great. Alexander conquered one of the largest empires in history before the age of 30. But what set him apart was not just how far he expanded his power, but how he understood it. In Greek mythology, Zeus was the king of the gods, the ultimate authority above all others. And Alexander did not just honor that figure, he began to connect himself to it. After visiting the oracle at Siwa in Egypt, he was reportedly declared the son of Zeus, a claim he did not reject. Instead, he allowed it to grow. As his empire expanded, so did the expectation that he be treated as something more than a king. In some regions, he adopted practices where subjects would bow or prostrate themselves before him, a gesture typically reserved for gods. This was not just cultural adaptation. It reinforced a shift. Alexander was no longer just ruling the world. He was being positioned above it. Whether he fully believed in his divine origin or used it as a tool to unify different cultures is still debated, but the pattern is consistent. His identity evolved alongside his power. The more he conquered, the less human he appeared, both to others and possibly to himself. By the end of his life, Alexander stood not just as a ruler of lands, but as a figure placed somewhere between man and God. In 323 BC, he died in Babylon at the age of 32. The man who was called the son of Zeus died without an heir to hold what he had built. Ramesses II. Ramesses II ruled Egypt for over 60 years, longer than most rulers of the ancient world. And during that time, he built something that went beyond power. He built permanence. In Egyptian belief, pharaohs were already considered divine, living representatives of the gods on earth. But Ramesses did not rely on belief alone. He reinforced it everywhere. Across Egypt, massive statues of him were carved into temples, cliffs, and cities, often at a scale that made him appear larger than life. These were not just monuments, they were statements. Wherever people looked, they saw the same image repeated, the same figure presented as eternal, unchanging, and dominant. This extended to his achievements. At the Battle of Kadesh, one of the largest battles of the ancient world, Ramesses presented the outcome as a personal, almost divine victory, even though historians believe the result was far more uncertain. Reliefs show him fighting alone, overwhelming enemies, a figure closer to a god than a man. This was not just storytelling, it was control of reality. By shaping how events were remembered, Ramesses shaped how he was perceived. Whether he fully believed in his own divine status or understood the power of that image is still debated. But the system worked. His presence became unavoidable, his identity fixed in stone across an entire civilization. Ramesses did not just rule Egypt, he made himself appear eternal within it. Nero. Nero ruled Rome during one of its most powerful periods. But what set him apart was not just his authority, but how he chose to express it. In Roman culture, emperors were expected to lead, command, and maintain order. Nero moved in a different direction. He aligned himself with Apollo, the god of music, light, and artistic perfection. But this was not admiration. It became identity. Ancient sources describe an emperor who believed his performances were not human, but something higher. He sang, played the lyre, and appeared on stage before large audiences, something considered deeply inappropriate for a Roman ruler. Yet Nero treated it as proof. According to accounts, he did not expect simple applause. He expected reverence. Crowds were required to stay, sometimes for hours, watching him perform, unable to leave, as if witnessing something beyond entertainment. This was not just vanity, it was transformation. Nero presented himself as a figure whose talent placed him closer to the divine than to ordinary men. He even competed in Greek festivals, declaring himself the winner regardless of outcome. Returning with honors he effectively gave himself. Apollo was not a ruler. He was something greater, something untouchable, and Nero seemed to prefer that role. Whether he truly believed in his own divinity or understood the power of that image is still debated, but the effect was clear. Nero did not just rule Rome, he performed above it. In 68 AD, abandoned and declared an enemy, he took his own life. The man who demanded admiration died without an audience. Nebuchadnezzar II. Nebuchadnezzar ruled Babylon at the height of its power, presiding over one of the most advanced cities of the ancient world. Massive walls, towering temples, and legendary structures were all tied to his name. But what defined his story was not just what he built, but how he saw it. According to the book of Daniel, Nebuchadnezzar stood over his city and declared its greatness as the result of his own power, not something granted, but something created by him. This was more than pride. It was a shift, a ruler placing himself at the center of everything he controlled. And then, according to the account, something broke. At the height of his power, his authority was stripped away instantly. He lost his reason, abandoned the palace, and was driven into the wild. He lived like an animal, eating grass, his hair growing long and unkempt, his body exposed to the elements. The king who ruled one of the greatest empires on earth could no longer control even himself. This was not gradual. It was immediate, a complete collapse from absolute control to nothing. Whether taken as literal history or symbolic narrative, the message is clear. Power pushed far enough begins to resemble something divine, and that belief can destroy the person who holds it. Nebuchadnezzar eventually returned to his throne, his sanity restored, but the image remained. The ruler who believed he stood above all others was reduced to something beneath them. Caligula. Caligula ruled the Roman Empire for less than 4 years, yet his reign became one of the most extreme examples of power turning into something else entirely. In Roman mythology, Jupiter was not just a god. He was the highest authority, ruler of the sky, one who controlled thunder, law, and order itself. And Caligula did not just respect that power, he tried to take its place. Born Gaius Julius Caesar, he inherited a system where emperors could receive divine honors after death, through ritual and worship. Caligula removed that boundary completely. Ancient sources describe a ruler who began identifying directly with Jupiter, not as a symbol, but as a living reality. He dressed in divine attire, appeared as different gods in public, and demanded to be treated as something beyond human. This was enforced, not suggested. Those around him were expected to worship him in person, to approach him as if standing before a god. Some accounts even describe him speaking to Jupiter's statue as an equal, not in prayer, but in conversation. The line between ruler and deity was no longer blurred. It was erased. This extended into his behavior. Caligula reportedly believed his will functioned as law itself, that anything he decided became reality simply because he had decided it. Whether this was true belief or absolute control is still debated, but the effect was clear. He placed himself beyond every limit. In 41 AD, members of his own guard assassinated him inside the imperial palace. The man who demanded to be worshipped as a god was killed by those closest to him. Commodus. Commodus ruled Rome as the son of Marcus Aurelius, inheriting one of the most stable empires in history. But what followed was a shift away from traditional rule into something far more personal. In Roman mythology, Hercules was not just strong. He was a demigod, a figure who completed impossible tasks and stood between human and divine. Commodus did not just admire that image, he became it. Ancient sources describe an emperor who openly identified himself as Hercules reborn, appearing in public draped in a lion's skin, carrying a club, and presenting himself as a living embodiment of the god. This was not symbolic, it was reinforced through action. Commodus entered the arena as a gladiator, not as entertainment, but as demonstration. He fought animals and staged opponents, ensuring victory while presenting himself as invincible. Crowds were not just watching a performance, they were witnessing a ruler proving something. The message was clear. This was not a man acting like a god. This was a man who believed he was one. He even renamed Rome and its institutions after himself, reshaping the identity of the empire around his own. Whether this was delusion, control, or both remains debated, but the pattern is consistent. Commodus removed the distance between myth and reality. In 192 AD, he was assassinated by those closest to him. The man who believed he was Hercules did not fall in battle. He was killed in his own palace. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See what's next.